Bacillus anthracis. Yeah, the bacteria behind anthrax. It usually only makes the news for, well, pretty terrifying reasons. But today we're going to look beyond those sensational biowarfare headlines. By breaking down the actual science and the agricultural data, we're going to uncover what this organism really is, how it operates, and why knowing the facts is absolutely your best defense against fear. So let's dive right into the explainer.
Which brings us to a massive question. Is our food supply safe from anthrax? Look, when most of us hear the word anthrax, our minds instantly flash back to those infamous fall 2001 Capitol Hill attacks, right? It's completely hardwired into our collective memory as this incredibly scary biological weapon. But actually, that's a highly weaponized, deliberate misuse of a naturally occurring organism. Today, we need to pivot. We need to ask a much more practical question for our daily lives. Does this biological agent actually threaten our everyday dairy and meat? Well, to figure that out, we have to look at what anthrax is doing out in nature, when humans aren't messing with it.
Section 1. Beyond the headlines. To really understand anthrax, you have to realize that it's a zoonotic disease, which simply means it's an infection that gets transmitted from animals to humans. At its core, anthrax is absolutely not some laboratory invention. It is primarily an agricultural disease. It's an ancient organism, one that bridges the gap between infected livestock, think cows, sheep, that sort of thing, and the humans who interact with them or their environment. It's a disease of nature, first and foremost.
Section 2. Biology of a survivor.
Okay, this organism has what I like to call a brilliant superpower. It's dual identity. On one side, you have the vegetative cell. This is the active, growing, feeding state of the bacteria. And interestingly enough, in this state, it's actually kind of weak. It has virtually no heat resistance and is rapidly destroyed by your standard pasteurization. But then, you have the spore. The spore is its dormant state, and it is an incredibly tough survivor. I'm talking surviving for literally decades in the soil. To destroy these spores, standard pasteurization won't even make a dent. You literally have to boil them for 10 full minutes or blast them with dry heat for 3 hours at a whopping 140 degrees Celsius. It's basically wearing biological armor.
Now, while the bacteria grows optimally at 37 degrees Celsius, which, by the way, just happens to be the internal temperature of a lot of mammals, it doesn't just form those super tough spores all the time. Actually, spores are only formed abundantly when the bacteria is exposed to strict aerobic conditions. So what does that mean? It means oxygen is the trigger. As long as the bacteria is safely sealed inside a host, it stays in that vulnerable, active, vegetative state. But the very second it senses the outside air, boom, it puts on its armor.
Section 3. Transmission and animal anthrax.
So how does this play out in the field? Well, the progression of how farm animals actually contract this disease is tragic, but honestly incredibly simple. Step 1. The soil is already contaminated with those dormant spores we were just talking about. Step 2. Grazing animals accidentally ingest these spores while they're eating pasture grass, or maybe they inhale them from the dust. Once they're inside the warm, oxygen-deprived environment of the animal, those spores wake up. Step 3. Severe bacteremia develops. This means massive internal infections in the lymph nodes, the spleen, the blood. And finally, Step 4. Sudden, unexpected death. The animal often succumbs so quickly there are barely any warning signs at all.
Which brings us to a really critical warning. Cutting open a carcass triggers abundant spore formation. Remember a minute ago when we talked about oxygen being the trigger? Well, if a farmer or a vet cuts open an animal that died of anthrax just to see what happened, they expose all that infected tissue to the air. The bacteria immediately panics and forms massive clouds of indestructible spores. Because of this, the absolutely crucial protocol is to never, ever open the carcass. You have to burn infected animals immediately. If you don't, insects, carnivores, or even nearby rivers can pick up those spores and spread them across massive agricultural areas.
Section 4. Forms of human anthrax.
So where do humans fit into this? Well, we can be infected in 3 distinct ways. The first is cutaneous. This happens when spores get into cuts or abrasions on the skin, often affecting people who are handling contaminated animal hides. It causes these nasty, pimple-like black eschars or scabs. But the good news? Cutaneous anthrax is readily treated with antibiotics. The other 2 forms, though, are far more serious. Pulmonary anthrax occurs when contaminated aerosols are inhaled deep into the lungs. This is the route that makes it a risk for postal workers handling contaminated mail or bioterror targets. And the third form is intestinal, which happens from ingesting contaminated organs or raw meat.
But before you get too worried, I want to reassure you with a specific number. Greater than 10 to the 4th power.
So over 10,000. That is the generally accepted infectious dose for the severe pulmonary and intestinal forms of anthrax, meaning it requires a really high concentration of spores to overwhelm the human body's initial defenses. You generally aren't going to get these severe forms from just a casual minor exposure.
However, we do have to face a sobering reality here. If the intestinal form does take hold, and this is usually from communities eating contaminated, undercooked, or raw meat from a sick animal, the resulting general intoxication carries a massive mortality rate of 25 to 50%. It is a severe, life-threatening gastrointestinal emergency. And honestly, this highlights exactly why strict food safety protocols are completely non-negotiable.
Section 5. Safeguarding our food.
Okay, let's talk about the milk in your fridge. Published data shows us that if milk were somehow contaminated, the active, vegetative cells naturally decrease and die off in the liquid. And what about the tough spores? Well, while they do remain viable, their germination, their ability to wake up and start growing, is absent or incredibly slow, taking more than 48 hours. Those dangerous spores essentially refuse to thrive in the environment of cow's milk.
Furthermore, we have this definitive quote from the International Dairy Federation. They state, "Milk is not considered to be a vehicle for transmission of the disease. Infected animals are usually too sick, and the milk secreted is visibly abnormal." So, the absolutely crucial point here is that safety is naturally built into the biological system itself. An animal suffering from sudden, severe anthrax bacteremia is just way too sick to be milked. And any milk it does manage to produce looks so visibly ruined that it would never, ever reach the consumer supply chain. It's a remarkably strong natural firewall.
And hey, we aren't just relying on nature to do the work. Scientists are actively protecting us behind the scenes too. Using highly sensitive PCR testing, which actually looks for the bacteria's DNA, and specialized culture mediums, they screen environments safely in Class 2 labs. This ensures that agricultural environments remain closely monitored and completely secure long before any product ever reaches your table. And the reason foods aren't routinely tested for this at the grocery store level, it's simply because the risk profile, as we've just seen, is incredibly low.
I want to leave you with a fascinating final thought about the future of this fight. Scientists have discovered specific enzyme tools called lysins, derived from bacteriophages, that can rapidly detect and actually kill the anthrax bacteria through targeted lytic activity. So the question is, could these lysins be the ultimate biosecurity tool? It's an absolutely incredible avenue of research, one that's paving the way for revolutionary treatments and even greater food safety assurances down the line. We've gone from a really scary headline to understanding the remarkable everyday science of detection and prevention. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking questions about the world around you.